I'll be heading back to the sci-fi range in this episode and making some pipes. Hello again. So to make these, you'll need to download the PDF that contains all the paper textures. It's a pay what you want file, so download it for free or pay as much or as little as you like. And you'll also need some toilet roll tubes. Lots and lots of empty tubes. So yeah, let's make a start. Okay then, so if we take one of those empty toilet roll tubes, the first thing we'll need to do is cut that lengthways so that we can open it out. Next we'll take a sharp knife and a metal ruler and just make sure that one of the ends of the tube is nice and straight, as they quite often aren't. After that, we can then measure out how long we want the pipe to be, so starting from the edge that I just cut straight, here I am measuring a distance of 3.5 inches as I'm simply making it as long as I can, to the closest half an inch, and then, as you can see, just cutting that to size. Then we'll need to square up one of the sides that was cut with the scissors, and you can either use a square or just the grid of the cutting mat to help with that, and then trim that to size. And from that last edge that we just cut, we'll need to mark a couple of lines, the first being 2 3/4 inches, and the second 3 3/4, like you can see me doing here. And we can then cut away the excess. So to quickly recap, the length of this particular pipe is 3.5 inches, the kind of circumference is 3 3/4 inches, and there's a line marked at 2 3/4. And it's also a good idea to accentuate the curve of the tube a little bit, by rolling it around a pen or similar. So there you go. Next we'll apply plenty of glue to the smaller side of the line that we marked out, and also a bit on the other end of the tube if you like, and then glue the tube back together, using that line as a guide for how much of the cardboard overlaps. So this kind of thing. And we'll then hold that together while the glue sets. Okay, next we'll print out the red texture, and if I bring in the small tube, we'll just need to decide how we want to decorate it. Like, do we want a number in the middle in this direction? Or perhaps in this direction instead? Or maybe we could have some hazard stripes wrapped around it. Or we could just have them running the length of the pipe. And in this example, that's what I'm going to do. So here I've cut out a piece that's the same length as the pipe itself, that's 3.5 inches, and I've also cut out enough to wrap around the whole thing, so 3 1/4 inches. And that's what we're going to do, just apply plenty of glue to the back with a glue stick, and then wrap that around the tube, doing our best to make sure that it lines up nicely with the edges. And there you go, that's the finished pipe. It's pretty straightforward, though you will of course need to make quite a few of these, like I've done here. And it's also worth making 1 or 2 smaller ones as well. Right then, next we're going to make some connectors, to join the pipes together. And for these, we'll cut out a piece of a toilet roll tube again, but this time it needs to be 2 inches long, the overall circumference is 4 inches, and the guideline is at 3 inches, as shown on the screen. Then we'll do a similar thing as before, and do our best to form that into a smaller tube. But as you can see, this time we want to make sure that the red pipes fit snugly inside, and that might mean making some small adjustments to our measurements, depending on the thickness of the card. For example, here I'm having to leave around a millimetre gap between the end of the card and the guideline that I made. Anyway, when we've done that, we can then cut out some of the dark grey texture that's big enough to wrap around it, so that's these sizes here, and then we can just glue that around the tube in the same way as we did for the pipes themselves, which is what you can see me doing here. So there you go, this is what we should end up with. However, we are going to do something slightly different with this piece. So we'll take another strip of the toilet roll tube that's been cut to 1/4 inch wide, and try to avoid getting a piece with any overlapping areas if you know what I mean. And all we're going to do with this is cut that so that it's long enough to wrap around one of the ends of the tube, like I'm doing here. Then we can apply some glue to the back and, like I say, wrap that around one end of the tube, making sure that it's stuck down firmly. Then, when we've done that, we can cut out one of the strips with this design, and as you might have guessed, we'll add some glue to the back of that and stick it on top of the bit of cardboard that we just added, like so. And that should result in something like this. We'll then just need to do a similar thing to the other end, but I've done that off camera, as you don't really need to see me do the exact same thing all over again. And now we have a piece that should allow us to connect two pipes together, as you can see. Though we are going to need to make T-junctions and things like that as well, and to do that we'll make another tube, just like the last one, same dimensions and everything, and you'll notice that the diameter of this is around 25mm, or 1 inch. And you might have also noticed that I've included a few templates in the PDF as well, one of which is 25mm. And here I've just stuck that to some thick card, which we can then use to help us cut the end of the tube into a shape that will allow us to join them together at a right angle. So to do this, we'll first need to squash the tube flat. We can then position the template on one end and use that to draw the wavy line onto the tube itself, which we'll then cut along with a sharp pair of scissors, like you can see me doing here on the screen. And that should result in this kind of thing, which, if we open back out, that will give us the kind of shape that we need to join the two pipes together. But before doing that, I like to decorate the straight end with more of the nuts and bolts texture, like I did with the main piece. And like I say, the wavy end, that should now be the right size and shape to give us a pretty good T-junction when the two pieces are glued together. So that's what we'll need to do next. And to do this, I like to get the piece roughly centralised first. I'll then kind of tack it into place with a few bits of hot glue, just to get it in the right position. And when I'm happy with that, I'll come back in with more hot glue and make sure it's stuck down more securely. So there you have it. There's our little T-junction connector. And if I quickly slot in some pipes that I made previously, there you go. As you can see, it actually works rather well. Right then, for this next piece we'll need, you guessed it, another empty toilet roll tube, in particular one that's around 40mm in diameter. And the reason for this is because ping pong balls, they're also around 40mm in diameter, which means that they should fit snugly in one end. And we can then use that to make some kind of silo or storage tank. However, it turns out that these tubes, they come in various sizes, depending on the brand or where you live. And if you happen to have one of the larger varieties, like this one that I've got here from a roll of kitchen towel, then obviously that's not going to work, as the ball will just fall straight through. That being said, you might still be able to use them by cutting them down the middle and measuring out a distance here of 126mm, though, as you can see, that doesn't leave much area to apply the glue. But just to prove that it can be done, I'll glue that together here. And there you go, now we have a tube that will be the right size for what we want to use it for. But like I say, most of mine, they're already 40mm in diameter, so I'm just going to use one of those. Anyway, once we have a 40mm tube, we're going to need to squash it flat and trim off one of the ends, just to make sure that it's actually straight. We can then measure a distance from that straight edge to however long we want the pipe to be. I'm just going with 3.5 inches again, roughly 90mm, so that I end up with something like this. Then we can print out the green texture, and again, it's up to you how to position it. You could have the grey part running top to bottom, or around the middle, but what I'm going to do for this one is have it be half and half. So to speed things up a bit, I've gone ahead and done that off camera, as it's just more of the same kind of thing. And I'm going to have it so that the ping pong ball goes in the green end. So, like that. Now, to cover that up, we'll take these textures and cut 6 of those out. We can then apply plenty of glue to the back of one of those, and then stick that to the ping pong ball, doing our best to smooth out any creases. So, this kind of thing. Then we can do the same thing again with another piece, but this time we're going to position it so that the edge with all the little rivets, that overlaps the plain edge of the first piece. Basically, something like this. We'll then do the same thing again with the rest of the pieces, and 6 pieces should be enough to cover half of the ball, though you can use more if you need to. So I've gone ahead and done the rest off camera, and here it is with all 6 pieces in place. And the reason we only need to cover half of the ball is because the bottom half is going to be hidden inside the tube. And even though it's a pretty tight fit, I am going to add some glue around the untextured part, just so that it holds in place a bit better. And that should do for now. Okay, for this next part, we'll need a couple of 1/4-inch strips of the toilet roll tube again, and like before, it's better if it's not doubled up in any areas. And what we're going to do with these is apply some glue to the back, and then wrap them around the top of the piece so that half is stuck to the tube and half is stuck to the ball. So, something like this. And we'll do the same thing with both pieces, trimming the second one to size so that we end up with a continuous strip of card running around the top edge. You know, this kind of thing that you can see here. Then we'll take another of the nuts and bolts textures and use that to cover up the cardboard again. It's the same kind of thing that we did with the ends of the connector pieces. And here's how it looks when we've done all of that. So, like I mentioned earlier, this could be some kind of silo or storage tank. And if you like, you can also make another one of these pieces to connect it to some of the smaller pipes, though if you do, you'll need to use a transition template instead of the regular 25mm one, because, you know, we're joining a 25mm tube to a 40mm tube, but other than that, it's the exact same process. So I'll go ahead and do that, getting it roughly aligned in the middle of the grey piece first, then tacking it in place with a bit of hot glue, and then adding some more glue when I'm happy with its position. It's the same thing as before. And with any luck, this is what we should end up with. And if I attach that to a couple of the smaller pipes, you can see how the whole thing goes together. It just adds a nice bit of variety. Though I do want to quickly add that I've also included a 40mm template in the PDF, just in case you want to join two of the larger pipes together, like you can see with these two pieces here. I've not used it myself, but I thought I would include it anyway. Okay, so the last couple of things we're going to make are a couple of end caps. For example, let's say we don't want a T-junction, we just want the pipes to turn a corner. So to make that work, we'll need to block off this end that I'm showing here. And to do that, we'll glue one of the circular pieces to some thick card, and once that's dry, we'll cut it to size with a sharp pair of scissors. Next, we'll cut a 1/4-inch strip of the toilet roll tube that has the same circumference as the red pipes that we made, and then form that into a tube like before. Well, it's more of a ring in this instance, but you know what I mean. And that should end up looking something like this, which we can then glue to the underside of the circular piece. Though, like some of the other bits and pieces, I'll start off with a bit of glue to tack it into place first, making sure that there's not any hot glue outside this little ring, and then add more glue to the inside when I'm happy that it's roughly centralised, which should result in this kind of thing, so the ring on the back and the texture on the front. We can then do the same thing with the other two variants. In addition, for the middle one, we can also glue the red wheel to some similar card and cut that out. Plus, we'll also need to cut out this metal strip, which we can glue around the outside of a drinking straw, and then cut that to size so that we end up with a tiny little piece like this. And if I just quickly get rid of all the bits we don't need, all we're going to do is put a tiny blob of hot glue in the centre circle of this piece, and then stick the drinking straw on top of that. So this is what we're aiming for. Then we can put another spot of glue inside the straw itself, and stick the wheel on top, getting it as centralised as we can. And it should end up looking something like this. And if I bring in that same corner assembly from earlier, you can see how this can slot into place to block off whichever end of the junction that we're not going to be using. And all of these end caps work in the same way, like you can see with this additional piece here. But yeah, I think that's everything covered for this PDF, and even though most of the stuff in this episode has been made from the humble toilet roll tube, I think it still turned out pretty well. So I'll end things by saying thanks for watching. There might be a couple more sci-fi episodes following along after this one, that is, assuming I don't get sidetracked with other projects, so I'll hopefully see you again in those. But yeah, thanks again, and bye for now.